look at this. This is the syllabus. This is Master of Arts and semester 4, and we are talking about this paper, Poetry 2. Now in this Poetry 2, this is semester 4 Poetry 2, and we are going to study this unit 1, narrative poetry, Isaiah chapter 1 to 10, then Lord Byron, Don Juan, Canto 1 and 2, Edgar Allan Poe, Henry W. Longfellow. Unit 2, nonsense poetry. These are the writers which are being included: Edward Lear, Lewis Carroll, Marvin Peake, and Sukumar Ray. And modernist poetry, W.B. Yeats, Wallace Stevens, T.S. Eliot. Unit 4 is performance or slam poetry: Grace Nicholas, Benjamin Zephaniah, John Agard, Kate Tempest, Raphael Ziad, and Mark Smith. Then these are the suggested readings. In these suggested readings, we will try to find out the exact articles which are there. For example, this MACHALE, beginning to think about narrative poetry. So I'll try to give you the idea what is there, and this will be the theory portion which will give us an idea that how could we understand that, what are the basic concept behind this nonsense poetry, slam poetry, and modernist poetry and narrative poetry. So this basic idea we'll try to understand, and that is what this first look at the syllabus. It's a 100-mark paper, and like this is the complete syllabus for Poetry 2. So you keep on looking at this syllabus, understand this, take a screenshot, and it will be easy for you to understand what we are going to read out. So focus on this suggestive readings also. So today we are going to discuss about this. One of the article, if you see in the beginning, you find here that beginning to think about narrative poetry, Brian McHale. This is actually the complete article which are poetry. Two fields intersect insignificantly. In fact, narrative poetry continues a substantial portion of literary history, encompassing epic, romances, ballads, autobiography, and even many lyric poems. So these are the components of narrative poetry. It could be literary history, it could be epic, and romances, narrative of romances, ballads, autobiography, and even many lyric poems are also considered as a narrative poetry. Given the prevalence of narrative in poetry, the author considered its exclusion from mainstream narrative theory to be a serious omission. I don't think I need to explain more than that. So, and you are all smart. You are a Gen Z generation. So I think you understand. Most of you understand. And so my focus is simply to, just give you the basic idea. So the author acknowledges some exceptions to the general neglect of narrative poetry. General neglect of narrative in poetry, such as Peter Hune's work and James Phelan's analysis of Frost's Home Burial. So you throughout this article, who is the writer? You please come. So Brian McHale, almost in half of the article, he's discussing about Peter Hune and James Phelan. So please understand this, what James Phelan and Peter Hune are talking about poetry, and they are actually with the reference of home burial, but we can implement these ideas and these basic concepts on rest of the poetry which has been already given. The different segments of poetry. However, they argue that even these instances primarily focus on the intersection of the narrative and lyric rather than on the specific relationship between narrative poetic form. Phelan, for example, explicitly defines lyricality as somebody telling somebody. You know how Phelan explained narrativity or narrative poetry, that is somebody telling somebody. So you can actually quote it also so easily. What he or she thought about something, somebody telling somebody what he or she thought about something. So that is the simplest definition by Phelan. Okay, and you can quote Phelan in your answer also. So that's what you have to remember. Phelan says what is narrative poetry is somebody telling somebody what he or she thought about something. That's the simplest definition. Now let's move ahead. Now when when we come here, now the author notes that Peter Hune, while focusing on narrative with lyric poetry, shares a similar understanding of lyricality with Phelan. Phelan scholars emphasize the psychological and mental aspects of lyric. Hume focused on the mental and psychological phenomena on incidents as typical of lyrical plots, while Hume approach different from Phelan in its emphasizing on the plot and eventfulness, neither restricted the concept of lyric to poetry alone. So this is becoming little technical, but anyway, it's easy. How narrativity within lyric poetry. So Phelan says narrativity within, Hume says narrativity within lyric poetry. And narration means simply saying something. Somebody tells somebody what he or she thought about something. So suppose you have an idea, you are thinking about something, for example, a jungle or a different kind of the climate you are talking about, or different kind of human nature or a human behavior you are talking about. Then you tell it to some of your friend, somebody, in a specific way. That's what. So your style of telling that information, sharing that information, will be a kind of narrative poetry. So that is what Phelan Peter Hume, we have to remember here. Right now, both scholars emphasize the psychological and mental aspect of lyric. That's what you please remember. So both the scholars are they are emphasizing on the psychological and mental aspect of lyric. Actually, there are many more explanations while we moving, so you don't bother and don't be confused, because when you're writing your answer, you just have to be very cool, calm, and you can actually focus on. So the author criticized both Phelan and Hume. Author here is Brian. Okay, the author criticized both Phelan and Hume for not adequately considering the unique role of poetic form in their analysis of narrative within poetry. Phelan's analysis of Frost, Home Burial, for example, neglect the poem's meter and alineation, effectively treating it as prose. Within Hume acknowledged the influence of poetic structure and options of supplementary to the underlying narrative rather than in integral component. So in this way, what both the scholars are missing something or adding something, that you can understand. So author criticized Phelan and Hume for adequately considering unique role of poetic form, because narrative poetry form has its own form. Narrative poetry has its own style, technique, and maybe these two scholars are able to miss that point. So this way you can go. Now the author argued that distinction between poetry and lyric is often overlooked in contemporary scholarship, with many scholars treating them as synonymous. However, the author contends that this is incorrect. Lyric can exist in prose form historically. A significant portion of poetry, particularly before 19th century, fell outside the category of lyric, encompassing narrative, discursive, and other form. The author suggests that the conflation of poetry with lyric is a relatively recent phenomena stemming from broader lyric transformation across various literary genre. So first of all, you have to remember both Phelan and Hume and what the aspect they are giving, and moreover some technicalities we have to add on. So while you are reading, actually you have to read these things again, because it will be little confusion also, and then you might confuse. So I explain here. The author argue that distinction between poetry and lyric is often overlooked. There is a distinction difference, poetry and lyric is a different. Both are different. Contemporary scholarship within many scholars treating them as synonymous. Although many scholars think that poetry and lyric is synonym. I mean, almost same. However, the author contends that this is incorrect. Lyric can exist in a prose form. So, lyric could be in a prose form, and historically a significant portion of poetry, particularly before the 19th century, fell outside the category of lyric, encompassing narrative and discursive and other form. The author suggests that conflation of poetry with the lyric is a relatively recent phenomena. So, this is, we are talking here at the ancient phenomena, and here it is the contemporary phenomena. What is that? Stemming from broader lyric transformation across various literary genres. So, now we have a lot of transformation in lyric. These 2 points are very significant. How this nativity and, the segmentivity is there. So, you see this, and let's see what is the further explanation is being given. Now, the author, okay, let me just make it little more powerful and broad, so it will be easy for you to understand. Okay, so the author introduces Rachel Blue Du Plessis concept of segmentivity. So, like when you are using this word segmentivity in your answer, you just write Rachel Blue Du Plessis in bracket. Okay, you can mention Rachel Du Plessis in your answer, and that is associated with segmentivity. So, segmentations in the poetry. As the defining feature of poetry, just as narrativity defines narrative and performativity defines performance, segmentivity or the creation of meaningful sequence by negotiation of gap characterizes poetry. While narrativity and performance also involve gap, segmentivity is considered more systematic and more constitutive. Okay, so this segmentivity is also one of the most significant part. Okay, and this segmentivity is associated with Rachel Blau Du Plessis. So, you remember this, right? Now, what is that? Segmentivity is while the there is narrativity and performance is there already with the poetry, but segmentivity which is considered to be more segmentic and more constitutive in the poetry. That is the concept, or that is the idea Rachel is trying to bring out in this aspect, okay, in this segment. Now, Du Plessis, okay, so this because we are explaining, so let's be little broad, and we can make it more powerful. Okay, so Du Plessis defines poetry as writing articulated in sequenced gapped lines that create meaning through bounded unlike a unit like words, line and stanza. These units interact with pauses and silences, influencing how meaning is constructed and experienced. Line breaks in particular can disrupt or enhance the flow of sentence significantly, impacting the poem's meaning and rhythm. So, this segmentation. So, Du Plessis is basically giving the segmentation. That is a more concrete and a more systematic segmentation. Although when we are reading, even when I am speaking right now, I am having a lot of pauses, and I am giving, breaking my sentences into small unit. But when we talk about that segmentation according to Du Plessis, that is more technical, that is more proper, that is more organized. So, that is what Du Plessis is trying to say about that. In this, the portion which I missed, and the portion which is there, what is there significant about that? So, let's talk what that paragraph talk about. Okay. The author acknowledges the author acknowledges potential counterexample to Duplass's definition of poetry, such as prose and oral poetry. Prose poetry, while seemingly lacking the segmentivity of line breaks, prose poetry foreground its prose format, making it a form of systematized. Okay, and oral poetry, although lacking visual spacing, oral poetry exhibit segmentivity through pauses, silence, and recurrent pattern, creating a metaphorical equivalent of white space. Despite these, white space means this gap. Here also you see after space and despite there is white portion. So that's what this white space is there. So you can actually use this term in a very powerful way in your answer, how this white space is being referred by Duplessis and with the reference of oral poetry. Okay. Despite these potential challenges, the author defined Duplessis' definition highly suggestive, though brief and abstract, to further clarifying to elaborate on this concept. The author intends to compare Duplessis' idea with the work of John Stoptor, whose essay published in the same year explores similar concept in greater depth. So now we have another writer. We have talked about there are till Duplessis we have talked about 3 writers. So before Phelan is there, Hume is there, Duplessis is there, and now we have John Stoptor, whose essay published in the same year explores similar concept in greater depth. Now next paragraph and then next meaning. Okay, so let's come to this. Yeah, because it's for one class it's difficult to read out the whole article and then it's actually very difficult. Okay, so now Stoptor redefines poetic measure. Instead of focusing on building blocks, he defines as the smallest a unit of resistance to meaning. Smallest unit of resistance to meaning. Like, smallest of the portion which is giving a unique and significant meaning. Meaning emerge from gap where meaning making is interrupted. Readers actually work to bridge the gap and construct meaning. Like in Hindi, there is one very basic example. The moment you pause, where do you stop? Where do you take a pause? It changes the whole meaning, complete meaning. Stop, let him go. Okay, for example, if I say stop, for example, if I say, in Hindi there is a very basic word, sentence I can say, Roko mat jaane do. Okay, so where I am taking the pause, Roko, stop. Roko mat jaane do. Stop, don't let the person go. But if I say roko mat jaane do, roko mat jaane do, don't stop the person, let him or her go. So I am putting pause here. I explain you. It's actually in Hindi, so let the person go. Oh, in Hindi, it's a Hindi sentence, so it would be difficult. Anyway, so how at the moment we are shifting the pause, the moment we are shifting the comma, it changed the whole meaning. So that's how the meaning emerged from gap while meaning making is interrupted. Readers actively work to bridge the gap and construct meaning. This concept resonates with other art forms. Similar principles are observed in graphic novels, gutter between panel, cinema, cuts. I mean, in the graphic novel, there is a gutter between panel, and in cinema, generally, what we say, cut. Cut means stop it. Now we have to start with new idea, where gap triggered active engagement with the viewer. So connection to narratology. This align with narratology with recognizes narrative gap as crucial for driving narrative progression. The next, it's actually stop. S-T-O-P. Stop. Sorry. What is the name of your writer? Shopta. It's a Shopta. No, it's somewhere. Miss. Yeah. So now let's come to these next point. Okay. So Shopta and Du places align Shopta's concept of unit of resistance to meaning align with Duplass's idea of segmentivity. So Duplass talk about segmentivity. Okay. So you just remember, because with the name of the writer, you have to remember their concept also, and that is the only way your answer will be more powerful and significant. So that's how you have to remember. So Duplass's idea of segmentivity. Okay, and then where the gap and breaks drive meaning making in poetry. Level of poetic measure. Shopto defines various level of measures in poetry. Word level, one word per line. Okay, so Cumming and Williams also suggest that. Sub-word level, letter and punctuation based experiments. Phrase level, emphasizing by dashes in Dickens poetry. Then line level, common in lyric poetry. Sentence level, prominent in language poetry. Section level, found in sonnet sequence and poems like The Wasteland. Additional level to complete Shopta's system, the author suggests including stanza level for additional metrical form, Spenserian stanza, Ottawa, Rima, and then foot level for traditional metrical poetry. So, when we are segmenting, segmentivity, the segmentation is on the word level, on the phrase level, on the line level, on the section level, on the additional level, on the stanza level, on the foot level. These are the all levels which are there for the segmentivity, and how these segments are being utilized here. This example you can see easily. Come to the next point. In this next point, okay, it has gone. How this is changing. I don't know how these words are missing. Sometimes strange things happen. Anyway, let's do. So counter measurement in poetry. Shopta argues that poetry involves not just measurement, identifying units of measure, but also counter argument. While different level of measures, for example, phrase, line in Dickens poetry. Counter measurements in narrative itself is segmented at various level. A story, events, narrative voices, time, space, consciousness, creating its own system, counter measurement. Poetic narrativity, a complex interplay in poetic narrativity, the segmentation inherent in poetry, meter, line, stanza, interacts with inherent segmentation of narrative, creating a complex interplay of chords. Frost Home Burial is an example. The narrative gap and the poem intricate from structural meter, line, sentence, section interact to create a unique and complex effects that would be lost in prose retelling. So, these are the technicality. So, and moreover, if it is directly associated with your, the answer, then I would be more focusing it. But these are the technicality which you can literally mention in your answer, and go back to this article again, and you can read out and get the explanation. So, and this is how the counter to rethink. And in this counter to rethink, the segmentivity and you know this how this counter to rethinking is being talked here. So segmentivity and counter measurement might provide just the tools we need to launch a robust program or of refresh into narrative in poetry. There is much do we do not yet know about the interaction of poetry and narrativity, and most of what we do know is local and particular, limit to specific poets, genre, and tradition. The general concept of segmentivity and counter measurement imply a research agenda for consolidating and integrating all that local knowledge into a capacious big tent theory of doetic narrative. So big tent theory, okay, try to find out what is this big tent theory, and just uh, what is this uh, do, poetic narrative, big tent theory, poetic narrative, and then how narrative is handled differently in poetry, different genre and sub-genre for different periods in different cultural tradition. Now these these points let's discuss and let's talk about that. So how this segmentivity and these different aspects are being discussed here. Let's come. So segmentivity and countermeasurement as tool. These concepts can be used to develop a comparative theory of narrative in poetry. Research agenda, how this includes investigating how different poetic form, meter, rhyme, stanza interact with narrativity, how narrativity is handled across different genre, period, culture, and languages, how segmentation and counter measurements vary across period, generation, and groups, the impact of translation and adaptation on poetic narrative. Benefits. This research would explain the scope of narrative theory to encompass the vast body of poetic narratives worldwide. And worthy endeavors are filling these gaps in the narrative poetry is valuable to its right, enriching our understanding of the significant body of literature. So in this way, we are actually trying to understand this article in a very proper way, because mostly what happened, these are little technical things are also there, so you do not involve into the technicality, just focus on the point which you can mention in your answer. Yes, so prose is not entirely continuous. Despite illusion of continuity, prose fiction is segmented in volumes, books, chapters, paragraph, and sentences. Segmentation in prose is under theorized. While some work exists in serialized novels, the segmentation of prose fiction beyond that is largely underexplored by narrative poetry. Volo Shivog work on paraphrase. He briefly touches upon the paragraph as a unit of dialogical discourse, but this idea has not been fully developed. As Stevick work on chapter, he offers insight into the fiction of chapter, but this area remains largely unexplored. Reviewing the study of prose and segmentation, the author suggests that a renewed focus on segmentation in narrative poetry could stimulate further research into the segmentation of prose fiction, potentially leading to more comprehensive theory of segmentation in narrative aspect. So then here we come, we are reaching towards conclusion, and this has become little bigger, but anyway, we need to understand this. That is giving you the basic idea what is this narrative poetry. This passage describes the aftermath of Sharpidon's death in battle. So Sharpidon's body is unrecognizable. He is covered in dust, gore, and weapon, making it difficult to distinguish him from the other fallen soldiers. Because actually before this, if you see, there is a poem, right? And this is the simple explanation of the poem. I think we can ignore this also. We can come to the next, but the same thing, how this poem is being explained here. So if you wish, you can actually pause the video and you can read out it. So here I wind up, and these are the references which are being given, and notes are there, and you can actually read out them, because this article is available online, and uh, this article is available online. You can read out, and you can download it. So uh, here, I'm just leaving the main focus or main idea we have already discussed. I hope it will make you clear little, at least it is going to help you, uh, little more. And here I say, mm, so let's uh, let's mm, end here. And you can find my YouTube channel, Dr. Anju Gurawa. With the name of my channel is very same my name which I'm writing. So you just search this, and subscribe, share to your friends, so they can actually get this benefit, benefit of reading. And my channel is easily surfaced. You can actually find it out, and if there are any comment, uh, you can uh, give it to me, write to me. And thank you so much. All the best. Bye. All the best. Thank you.